Today, every tram line and practically every suburban railway in Melbourne is fully electrified. This hasn't always been the case, however, and alternate, non-electrified means of pulling trams were present in Melbourne as late as the 1940s. Our story today is from a bit earlier than that, however, in a time where electricity in Melbourne was practically non-existent. The year is 1896. Melbourne's entire suburban network is still steam-hauled, and almost every tramway in the city is a cable tram, with the exception of a few horse trams that are still operating and a single electric tram from Box Hill to Doncaster, which was operating at a significant loss and would close within a year. It was in this environment that Mr. Arthur Winslow Jones of Melbourne made a proposal to the Victorian Legislative Assembly, which was widely marked as the first proposal for electric traction in Melbourne. Jones was an executive in the General Electric Company and at the time represented the company in Melbourne. Inspired by the success of the electric networks popping up across Europe and America, and in particular the success of the Ottawa electric tramways, the Victorian Legislative Assembly reached out to Jones to provide a testimony as to the validity of the conversion to electric traction for suburban lines. Jones eagerly accepted this request and even went as far as to provide a quote for the cost of converting a limited inner suburban system. Little remains of his first proposal, with the only information I can find being that Jones's proposal used the St Kilda line as an example, with the expectation that if it was to go through then more lines would promptly be converted. The Assembly took Jones's advice and passed it on to the railways. Whilst his testimony did update some of the Victorian Railways' somewhat outdated beliefs on electric trains, they did not see it as feasible in the near future. As a result, nothing of any significance would happen except for a recommendation that no more construction of suburban railways should take place until electrification had commenced. However, this was promptly ignored as suburban railways continued to open through the 1890s and into the 20th century. This was not Jones's final proposal to the Victorian government, however. Seeing his recommendations for electric railways being disregarded, he returned with a much more in-depth proposal for an electric tramway from Williamstown to the city in 1898. The existing railway from Spencer Street to Williamstown was scheduled to take 30 minutes, whilst Jones expected his tram to be slightly slower at 40 minutes. He expected to make up for this with lower fares, charging only 6p each way compared to the 9p fare on the railways. The basis for this line was a tram through Williamstown to the ferry port just north of the settlement, where you would transfer to the ferry for the trip to Fisherman's Bend, and then transfer again for an electric tram from Fisherman's Bend to Queen's Bridge. I will now go into more detail. The line would start on the Williamstown side at the base of Cole Street, running down Cole Street over the railway on a bridge and to Nelson's Place. No interchange was designed with the railway, and it was actively avoided, as at the time the railways and tramways competed with one another rather than complementing each other as they do now. From Nelson's Place it would run north for 400 metres before turning west onto Ferguson Street, then north again onto Douglas Parade. It would run along Douglas Parade for another kilometre and a half before turning east onto North Road. At that time, North Road extended right up to the waterfront to a ferry stop. Jones expected this whole section to be built a single track with no passing loops, and with a depot likely located somewhere near the ferry stop. It was expected that the whole line could be operated by a single tram, operating a shuttle with 5-minute stopovers at each end. Using the 24 mph speed provided by Jones, and assuming a total length of this section of 3,700 metres, we can assume a travel time of 15 minutes using the line and a 30-minute frequency in each direction. An extra tram was expected to be purchased to be stored in a small depot to allow use as a replacement if the other one broke down. Power for the tram was to be provided as a 600-volt DC overhead, similar to our trams today, with the source detailed as a small power station at the ferry stop with 3 225-kilowatt dynamos. Interestingly, this location is almost exactly where Newport Power Station would be built about 20 years later to provide power for Melbourne's electric railways. The next section of the line is slightly less clear, however here is what I can infer. The ferry would transfer passengers over the Yarra to a dock at the foot of Williamstown Road on Fisherman's Bend. This area, before development as an industrial zone in the 1930s, was effectively a swamp, with the only settlement being some small fishermen's huts from which the area gets its name. As a result, very few passengers were expected to come from this region. The ferry trip was only expected to take about 5 minutes, traversing around 600 metres of water. Originally, Jones explored the possibility of putting rails on specifically built ferries to shuttle the trams themselves over the river. However, it was decided against as it would further complicate things and likely extend transit time. It would follow Williamstown Road for 4 kilometres, then turn north onto Normanby Road for a further 2 kilometres to Queen's Bridge. Here the electric tram would terminate, and anyone wanting to go further would need to walk to a nearby cable tram or to Flinders Street railway station. This section would still be single track, however a crossing loop would be provided and 2 trams would operate the line together. Using a 6-kilometre length and the aforementioned 24 mile per hour speed, the section would take about 20 minutes with a 10-minute stopover at each end, allowing for a 30-minute frequency to be maintained. Power would still be provided by the plant on the west bank, however the method that the electricity was to be brought over the river is not stated. The full cost of this tramway was expected to be roughly £20,000. This is broken down into about £700 per tram for 4 trams, £1,250 per kilometre of track for 14 kilometres, and roughly £4,000 accounting for the construction of the power station and other related equipment. Accounting for inflation, that equates to roughly $4 million today. Whilst certainly higher than the 20,000 figure, $4 million for an electric tramway nowadays is a good deal. In retrospect, it can be seen why this tramway wasn't built. Jones was not a particularly driving character, and he lacked the financial backing to orchestrate the line, relying on a financial grant from the government that would never come. Furthermore, the longer travel time combined with the fact that you would need to transfer twice to get from Williamstown to the city meant that it was just easier to catch the train from one of Williamstown's 4 stations at a time. Jones would leave Melbourne just a few years later, returning to the US to further his career at General Electric. Whilst Jones's proposal would have no lasting impact on Melbourne, his ideas would eventually materialise, and today Melbourne operates the largest electric tram network in the world. Jones died in 1919 at the age of 59 years, and as a result, he barely lived to see the conversion of the Melbourne suburban network to electric, commencing in 1919. Quick outro. One thing I wanted to put here is speculation over the actual working history of the line, because already with this video I'm already like kind of teetering on, like, you know, I'm inferring a lot of things. So I don't want to put this as fact, but if it did operate, if it was built, I highly doubt the Williamstown side would have lived to see any use after like 1900. Like, it probably would have closed immediately. The poor Melbourne side I can see having some use. Maybe if it might close and then reopen, because Melbourne would start to see electric trams only 10 years after this would have been built. Less than 5 years after this would have been built. So I can see, you know, someone along the line reopening it, at least to down Williamstown Road. Maybe not all the way to Fisherman's Bend, but you never know. Research for this came from some newspaper articles. There's a few newspaper articles from the time, and I got the idea from, it's a very obscure idea, but like obscure topic, but I got the video idea from, I'm researching the opening of the Melbourne Metro like electric network in 1919. So got everything kind of, all the books and stuff always kind of like prefaces this, but they have no information on it. So I did a bit of research, and here you go. So I did this so you don't have to, on this very obscure topic that you'll never think of again. Thanks for watching. Bye.